Middle-aged woman learns the stunning truth behind her adoption. Everyone's gone through a time where they felt they didn't belong, but Denise McCarthy grew up knowing that her own parents didn't want her. For the 44-year-old, that was a pain that wouldn't fade easily. Although her adoptive parents loved her, her past often felt too hard to bear. Unable to shoulder that doubt any longer, in 2020, Denise decided to find out the truth as to why she was abandoned as a baby. She just hoped it wouldn't break her. Before we begin, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell for more amazing videos. She was told her family left her behind at a hospital in South Korea because she was too sick to care for. But Denise let go of what could have been. That frustration and pain, coupled with the fact that she felt alone in Vermont, convinced her that she needed to find her own way. Her adoptive parents were white, and they lived in an area where there were no other Asian people. It didn't necessarily mean that Denise was unloved or always treated differently, but it was an everyday challenge to fit in. As she grew into adulthood, she realized that following her heart and discovering her native roots was something she had to do. It was around this time she turned 40, in 2016, that Denise first traveled to South Korea, where she was born. She didn't know what she would find there, but she hoped it would come with closure. It turned out to be more eventful than she could have hoped. While in South Korea, Denise came across a government program that helped South Korean adoptees find their biological parents. All she had to do was send in a piece of her DNA, and hopefully there would be a match. She wound up waiting for 4 years, but found that the wait was worth it in the end. Once she returned stateside, she more or less forgot about the DNA test. Then one day in early October 2020, she received a phone call from the South Korean program. They'd found a match. The problem was that she couldn't see them. With the coronavirus pandemic in full swing, people had to stay socially distant, so international travel wasn't an option. When Denise heard about her biological family, she still couldn't help but feel overjoyed, and she proposed an alternative. They would meet over Zoom that month. Denise waited with bated breath in front of her laptop for the Zoom meeting to begin. She wasn't sure what to expect. What would her family be like? Would they explain why they left her? But she knew she'd have her answers. When the cameras began rolling, so did tears. The screen turned on. Denise's mother, sister, and brother were virtually sitting right in front of her. Even with their face masks on, she could see tears and emotions pouring out of them right away. They didn't look like people who would deliberately abandon a helpless baby. It turned out that they didn't. Denise's family shared the whole story, starting with Denise's birth name. Her older brother, twin sister, and Oma, which is the Korean word for mom, called her Sang-ai and explained how she'd gone missing for a little over 4 decades. It happened back in 1976 when Denise and her twin sister, Sang-hee, were only 2 years old. On a warm June day, their grandmother took the twins out to the market, which was dreadfully busy at the time. There were so many people that the grandmother lost sight of both of them at once. She didn't waste any time trying to find them. Their grandma looked high and low for both her granddaughters, and at last they found Sang-hee, but Sang-ai, now Denise, was nowhere to be found. The family was broken up about their loss. The father completely lost himself to alcoholism over the grief, but they never gave up hope in the end. While the father struggled to hold himself together, eventually dying of liver disease about 20 years later, the family kept themselves together as best they could. They never left the neighborhood, never stopped making flyers to find Denise, and even came up with a clever plan in hopes they'd cross paths with her again. The family set up a shop of their own in that very same market where Denise went missing as a toddler. They'd hoped she'd come back in search of her family, but there was no way that would happen right away, not with what Denise was led to believe and where life had taken her. The orphanage that took Denise in was unaware of what happened. All they knew was that a baby was left in a hospital in bad condition. With no contact with the family, they allowed Denise to be adopted by the American couple that Denise would call mom and dad for the next 40 years. Denise also learned that after she visited South Korea and entered her DNA in the government program, her mother did the same a year later in 2017. It seems like it was meant to be, as thousands of South Korean adoptees may never find a match for one reason or another. All her life, Denise thought she was left behind, but there her family was, relieved to finally find her after so many decades of searching. She now knew that the only things that separated them were international borders, and none of them could wait to cross over. The reunited family made plans to see each other in person following the end of the pandemic. They even have their sights on vacation time together in Hawaii. As tragic as the story's been, they're just happy to be together. Denise finally feels less alone, especially with a twin who's just like her. Denise shares that she and her twin sister don't just look alike, they also have the same voice, like the same colors and foods, love traveling, and have the same sense of humor. As amazing as it was to meet with them, she was saddened by the absences of her grandmother and father. But the optimistic family looked at the loss in a happier light. I know he was there in spirit because I think that he just made this happen. And I think that my maternal grandmother, who lost us that day, I know she was there as well. I could just tell, shared Denise. For her, finding them brings her a feeling of completeness. To have that missing piece of what happened to me is just incredibly overwhelming and happy, and it makes me feel whole. As much as this had been meant for her, Denise hadn't forgotten about her adoptive parents. She wants them and her biological family to meet because they're all a part of her loving family now. I just got this huge family now that loves me and that I love, she said. You can't be happier than that. You can't ask for more than that. And everyone was fascinated to learn what the other half of their big family was up to. The similarities between Denise and her twins sparked a lively conversation. Whenever we look at family members who grow up in different circumstances, nature versus nurture always lingers in the background. Some say inherited genes play a bigger role than life experiences in determining our health, while others claim the opposite. These two schools of thought have been at odds for decades. People that firmly believe that our genetic codes predetermine all human characteristics without any influence from our outside environments are called nativists. That means our outcomes are evolutionary, passed down from generations. Please share this story with your friends and family.